Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Diversity Live and to this, the Gender and 50 Plus stage today, presented by the WFA. Going to talk briefly about the context and particularly the global context of leadership. Then I'm going to touch on what I used to do at the Royal Bank of Scotland Group. I stepped down recently, and then I'd like to start talking a bit about the impact on the diversity and inclusion agenda we can already see around the world and what concerns that sets up, and indeed what then the WFA are doing by way of response. I love the serendipity that you're watching this on VE Day, the day that the victory in Europe was celebrated post the Second World War. At the moment, we seem to have no global leadership at all thinking about the post-virus environment and what to do, and that's in complete and stark contrast to what happened during the Second World War, whether it was in 1941 when Roosevelt and Churchill introduced the Atlantic Charter, precursor for the UN, or in 1942 here in the UK where the Beveridge Report set up the welfare state, leading to the launch of the glorious National Health Service in 1948. So leadership back in the Second World War was thinking about post-World War, but our global leadership at the moment doesn't appear to be thinking about that at all. But there are things we should all be concerned about, especially today listening to the Bank of England framing the economic outcome. So it's a bit difficult to be anything other than gloomy about the future, but that's not what I want to be. I want to be positive about what can happen next. I particularly want to reflect on what I see happening in the banking sector. I was for 5 years the CMO of the Royal Bank of Scotland Group. I joined back in 2015 to report to the wonderful Ross McEwen, the then CEO, as part of the cleanup team. I stepped down on February the 14th, moving into what is fashionably called the third chapter. And one of the things I'm fiercely proud of is how well the bank led the diversity and inclusion agenda. And actually, let me start by highlighting today the bank is led by two C-suite members, the CEO and CFO, who sit on the main board and are both women. The wonderful Alison Rose and the fabulous Katie Murray lead the bank. That's quite incredible that two women are at the helm of one of Britain's biggest banks. When I joined my leadership team, first time I'd ever had a leadership team that was entirely male. When I left, it was just as it should be, 50-50. And you do that not by having targets, but by taking action. So my other reflection of the Royal Bank is the power of building culture inside out. But one of the things we really focused on was the humanity required and treated people as individuals wherever they came from. I always saw my leadership task as being to get the best out of people and to enable them to be their whole selves when they came to work. And these are words actually that are on the walls and against the values of the Royal Bank now, the NatWest Group, but they're lived day in, day out. And I think that's absolutely fundamental to ongoing success. I think the other great lesson of the Royal Bank was it was hubris that got the bank into terrible trouble back in 2008. And we decided as a leadership team that it would be humility that would get us out of that mess. And I'm very proud to say the bank now turns a profit again. The bank I'm looking at today is doing a phenomenal job of supporting small businesses, medium-sized businesses and individuals to get through this phase. And I know they'll do everything they can and they'll do it in the right way as they always have done. So very proud of the bank. Moving then to talk a little bit about the impact on the advertising and marketing sector. What you can see is expenditure is massively down. This is going to impact media owners who are not getting their advertising support. But actually, if you look at the New York Times as an interesting example, that was their earnings call yesterday, what they're seeing is a massive increase in subscriptions. Because of that massive increase in subscriptions, their stock price went up, but they're also seeing a massive decrease in advertising income, predicting in fact that that's going to go down 55% this year. And their models still demand return, and that return is leading people to have to work the numbers, and as they do, they're taking costs out, and unfortunately one of the first ways to do that is to take people out, not, in my view, a smart way to proceed. You can also see that just as on the front line, there's a disproportionate impact on the BAME community in particular. Over 47% of the National Health Service is provided by the BAME community frontline. There's also a disproportionate impact on them when it comes to the most tragic of things, and that's the deaths resulting from it. So not a great moment if you take just the data, but a great moment if you choose, as I hope you're all going to take positive action to make sure change happens as we move ahead. And that's also one of the things that's led to the WFA recently publishing its latest report on diversity and inclusion. The 4 C's that are driving that are all focused around the culture that can drive change. The WFA sees itself first as a convener. It can bring together best practice from around the world and people who are driving the change agenda to help learn from each other and provide learning for others. So that's the first C. The second one is a curator. At the moment, if you look on LinkedIn, you'll see that they're curating the content of the advertising that people are doing through COVID. And there's some fantastic stuff supporting the D&I agenda there. So convener, curator, then a catalyst for change, catalyst to make things happen and drive the discussions around the world. And finally, and crucially, a challenger to make sure that some of the difficult questions are asked when and where they need to be asked. And actually, I think there's some difficult questions coming up. Thanks so much.